Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Hockey Hour. It's your two favorite hosts again, as we are going to discuss the Metro Division and more on this week's episode. Alrighty, so as everyone read in the thumbnail, it's Metro Division Preview Week, and this week we're going to preview the entire Metro Division in the National Hockey League, starting with the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, Carolina has been up and down since they won the Cup in 2003. They've had their up and down years.
2006, you mean?
Yeah, 2006. And they've gone to the playoffs multiple times, so they're definitely a reputable team to make the playoffs. What do you think is their strengths and weaknesses, and where do you see them finishing? As remember, they finished first in the Metro last year, which secured the 2 seed in the East with a record of 52-21-9, a home record of 28-10-3, a road record of 24-11-6. They had 266 goals for and 213 against. And Don Waddell is the GM of the Carolina Hurricanes, and Rod Brind'Amour is the coach. Their captain last year, I don't know if they've announced their captain this yeir. Their captain last year was Jordan Staal.
Yeah, it's the same as last year, Jordan Staal.
Their alternate captains last year were Sebastian Aho, Jordan Martinook, Jacob Slavin. They play at the PNC Arena, and the average attendance 19,613.
Oh yeah, PNC Arena, one of the more underrated arenas in the National Hockey League, and that's where the Hurricanes themselves. You know, if you take the Boston Bruins out of the equation last year, the Hurricanes would have finished as the best team in the regular season last year. They looked like they were going to compete for the Stanley Cup when they were matched up against the Florida Panthers. Unfortunately, injuries to Max Pacioretty and Andrei Svechnikov may have turned that spiral to a downward spiral come conference finals, because those two absences showed up when they faced the Florida Panthers, combined with the fact that Sergei Bobrovsky went absolute God mode against them in the 4-game sweep. The heartbreaking part of that sweep was that the Hurricanes were actually the better team. Now we go on to, what do you do if you're the Carolina Hurricanes? Well, we may have those questions answered. They know they have to go all in. That's why they went after Dmitry Orlov and Michael Bunting in the offseason. Orlov signed to 2 years at a $7.75 million cap hit. Bunting, 3 years, $4.5 million cap hit. And brought back Tony DeAngelo at a 1-year deal, $1.675 million cap hit. Orlov was the best defenseman available in free agency, coming off perhaps what was the best season of his career, after he had 36 points split between the Washington Capitals and Boston Bruins. Though his road to Bruins, that's when he tore it up. Bunting is a power forward that can fit anywhere in the first, second, or third lines, and DeAngelo, he's an offensive defenseman who, at this point in his career, he can help quarterback a second unit of a power play. Though many players on the Hurricanes, they're on contract years. Though Sebastian Aho, he got an 8-year extension at a $9.75 million cap hit. He's the face of the franchise, so that was expected there. But Martin Necas had a breakout season last year at 71 points, 4 overtime game-winning goals in the regular season, which led the team. He's due for a new contract next summer. He's currently at a $3 million cap hit, which now looks like an absolute steal if you're asking me. So he's not the only one that's on a contract year. There's also Teuvo Teravainen, Brady Shea, Brett Pesce, Jordan Martinook, Seth Jarvis, Stefan Nason, and Jack Drury, who are also on contract years. There's been trade speculation surrounding Pesce because he's not satisfied with his current contract. I feel there's a belief that he thinks that he's worth more than his current $4.025 million cap hit, which led to the numerous trade speculations. Carolina tried going after Vladimir Tarasenko and Erik Karlsson. That fell apart, both of them. Tarasenko changed agents, and Karlsson was acquired by the Penguins, who we will discuss later. But Carolina is still the best defensive team in the league, headlined by Jacob Slavin, the best defensive defenseman in the league. And that's not an exaggeration by this. The big question around Carolina is their goaltending tandem, because they brought back both Frederick Anderson and Antti Ranta, who even though they were one of the better goaltending tandems among the top half of the league, I need to restate this, among the top half of the league in goaltending tandems, Anderson hit a subpar regular season, but he made up for it in his 9-game run in the playoffs. Though the concern is age. It's not ideal that you have a goaltending tandem where your two goalies are 33 and 34 years old. Their third goalie, Pyotr Kochetkov, he had moments of brilliance, but inconsistency is his biggest issue. He may be the starter of the future if he were to get his consistency up. He can learn from Anderson and Ranta more, but age is the biggest concern here. Carolina is definitely going to fight for the Metro Division, though they may be approaching last chance territory. Though this year has to be the year that they go deep. What do you think?
I think, like you said, this year definitely has to be more or less a make or break year for Carolina. I think there's a lot that Carolina has coming back, which will help them. I just don't really know if there's a lot there to build off of as far as like have the individual players hit their ceiling. Like the team leaders from last year, Aho had 36 goals. That's a team lead. Assists, Brent Burns and Martin Necas, 43 assists each. Points, Necas with 71 points. Penalty minutes, Andrei Savchenkov, 71 penalty minutes. Plus and minus, Jalen Chatfield with plus 23. You mentioned goaltenders. Anderson had 21 wins, which is the most on the team. And Ranta averaged 2.23 goals against, which is also a team leader. It seems to me that, especially last year, December really seemed to be Carolina's strength. They went 12-0-1. When you break that down, they went 7-0 at home and 5-0-1 on the road.
Good signs for the holidays.
Yeah. Preseason, they went 4-1, 3-0 at home, 1-1 on the road, which everyone knows preseason is deceiving. For the most part, this team seems balanced, or did last year. I guess Florida just had a better showing last year when it came down to it, because I would have thought that Carolina would have made the cup last year, but Florida decided no.
I mean, look at the shots on goal differential in all four of those games. Carolina, they outshot Florida in those games.
Yeah.
And getting the better chances. It's just Bobrovsky becoming a wall.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, he's probably my favorite goaltender. But I mean, there's only if you go back and look at the game log, they finish above 500 in every single month. 6-2-1 in October, 6-4-4 in November. Like I said, 12-0-1 in December, 9-3-2 in January, 6-2 in February, 8-7-1 in March, and 5-3 in April. They just know how to play hockey, and there really is no take a game off in that culture. It looks like.
I love the culture that the Hurricanes have established there.
Oh yeah, it's a really good one. I wish the Jackets would, as we'll discuss later, I wish the Jackets would have a culture like that, and I think they're headed in the right direction with that. I think the rotation is definitely a good one that they have going. I mean, for the most part, it looks like most of the roster, at least a decent chunk of the roster, played 82 games or close to it. I just think, this is an organization and a roster that's built to win, and they've proven that they can make the playoffs easily. It's getting over the hump of winning when you need to in the playoffs.
Yep. We found some of that 2006 magic for the Hurricanes. You remember that year when they won the Cup?
Oh, yeah. Speaking of winning the Cup, the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Columbus Blue Jackets.
Man.
All right. The Jackets, last season was the 23rd season for the franchise. This is the 24th. The franchise was established on June 25th, 1997. On March 17th of 2023, the Jackets were eliminated from playoff contention after a loss to the Anaheim Ducks. We finished dead last, 8th in the Metropolitan, and dead last, 16th in the Eastern Conference. Overall record of 25-48-9. Home record is 16-23-2. Road record of 9-25-7. Goals for 214. Goals against 330. GM Jarmo Kekalainen. Coach was Brad Larson. It's Mike Babcock. Babcock, yeah. Mike Babcock now. The captain was Boone Jenner.
And he still is the captain.
Cool. Alternate captains were Gustav Nyquist, Zach Werenski, who was a rotating captain from February 28th to April 14th. Arena, they play at the beloved Nationwide Arena. Their minor league affiliates are the Cleveland Monsters of the AHL and the Kalamazoo Wings of the ECHL. So the team leaders last year, goals was Boone Jenner with 26, assists with Johnny Hockey or Johnny Gaudreau with 53. He was also the points leader on the team with 74. Penalty minutes was led by Matthew Oliver with 81. Plus and minus was Samuel Kazzo with 0. Goalie wins Jonas Corpusalo. And goals against average, well, he had 11 wins. Goals against average was Jet Greaves with 3.05. Personally, I think we shouldn't have traded Corpy to begin with, because Corpy was the best goalie we had last year. He had the most wins by 1.5 miles. Because as much as I love Elvis Merce Lincoln's, he only had like 5 wins last year, if I remember correctly. Granted, it seemed like Corpy was dealing with, I believe Corpy was dealing with an injury, and that's kind of why it seemed like he was crap in goal, because he was dealing with a lot outside of, the actual hockey rink. And I'm only half like surprised the way that the Jackets season went last year, only because it's kind of normal the way that it went. The years that we've ever made the playoffs is kind of one of those like, whoa, we actually did good and we actually have a good franchise and team. I think there's a lot of potential on this team. I think that between the moves last year that they made and the moves they made this offseason, between bringing in the new head coach and you signed Johnny Hockey last year, you still have Chinikov, and you still have Patrick Laine. That duo right there is going to be key, because that's your strong 1-2 punch. You got to have – I'm not 100% sure who they're going to have in goal this year outside of Elvis. Elvis needs to step up, have a better year than he did last year. And because you've got to have control in the net. If you look at the teams that have success in the postseason and have success throughout the season enough to actually make the playoffs, you have control in the net. You got to be a dominant force on every level. Yes, the fifth line is a cool thing. I've been a part of it many times. But the atmosphere in the arena is partial key, but you've got to have the atmosphere inside the walls. I think if this team stays healthy this year, they could definitely make a playoff push. I think it'll be another late playoff push. I was even surprised that they were in playoff contention until they weren't. I thought with the way the season was going, I mean, if you look at the monthly breakdown for the Jackets, where is it? I think it's up. If you look at the monthly breakdown for the Jackets, God, where is it? 3-7 in October, 4-5-2 in November, 4-10 in December, and 4-10-2 in January. That's your two big months right there. You need to, no worse, be 7-7 or 8-8 in those months. The longer months, the more games you have months, you've got to be at worst 500, if not better than 500. I mean, every single month under 500, except for February, and I have no idea as to why.
All-Star game.
Yeah, most likely. March was just a horrid month. They went so in February they went 5-3-2. In March they went 3-8-2. April 2-5-1. I just when I look at the schedule breakdown that way, it makes me sick to my stomach. But
so
what are your thoughts?
So I'll have to say, to add on to this, from what you're saying, on the surface, one would think that the Blue Jackets are one of the worst teams in the league. But when we scratch deeper into the surface, outside the fact that they were tied for the second worst team with the Chicago Blackhawks, just in front of San Jose Sharks by a single point. And we look deeper into the surface, look at all the man games lost. Look at all the injuries there. The Patrick Laine injury in the first game, and I mean the very first game of the season. And at that point, it's like, all right, that's a one-off. No need to worry about that. We'll be fine. Then comes the pile of injuries coming up more and more and more as the season goes on. Mm-hmm. And then Zach Werenski in game 13, that was the death blow. The Blue Jackets never recovered from there when Werenski went down. No matter how much that Jonas Korpisalo was doing in boosting his trade stock. And let me get this. Every single one of their players was not on the plus side of the plus minus. Out of anyone that's played at least 50 games, the one who had the best plus minus of them was Vladislav Gavrikov at a -8. And he was involved in the trade deadline too, in that Korpisalo trade. They did not even win a single game in regulation in the months of March and April. 6-5 overtime win over San Jose March 14th. 7-6 overtime win over Washington March 21st. 5-4 over the Islanders March 24th. 4-3 against Ottawa April 2nd. And 3-2 over my Penguins on April 13th. So I'll give kudos to Jarmo Kekalainen on doubling down on defense and going after not only Ivan Provorov, but also Damon Severson to add to the defensive core. Funnily enough, Provorov was actually in the same draft class as Zach Werenski was. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many picks apart, if I need to look that up, but them being on the same team and two draft class, two players from the same draft class together, well, this makes for an interesting turn of events here. And to add Severson for more offense to the team and to get an offensive push and a power play specialist, that helps too. And not only that, but you get Adam Fantilli at the draft at 3rd overall when the Ducks decide to draft Leo Carlson 2nd overall. That can make some strides there in boosting the top 6. I can see Fantilli over with the other Michigan Wolverine, Kent Johnson, who's been a staple on that second line of Patrick Laine. Though this may force Jack Roslovic to be going down to the 3rd line in a sense, because the first line is set between Johnny Hockey, Boone Jenner, and Kirill Marchenko, in my opinion. So that sets Roslovic over to the 3rd line. Alex Texier is also coming back after a 1-year break from Columbus after he went overseas to Europe. Much improvement is going to be expected from Columbus, though they need to figure out that logjam on defense. They have at most 9 NHL caliber defensemen: Werenski, Severson, Provorov, Adam Boquist, Jake Bean, Andrew Peak, Eric Branson, Nick Blankenberg, and possibly David Jiricek, though he's expected to start his pro career with the Cleveland Monsters. The team with Johnny Hockey, Laine, a fully healthy Werenski, Kent Johnson, and Merzlikins bouncing back to go with the new additions. Is there a team that has a bigger argument than the Columbus Blue Jackets for most improved team? I don't think so.
Personally, I don't think so. Even as a not super fan of the team. I mean, again, you look at the records each month from last year, and I'm sorry, YouTube, but it looks disgusting. It looks outrageously disgusting, and it makes me want to throw up, because this team on paper is so much better than the way that it played last year. But to your point and my point, injuries derailed this team. This team could have had a lot of success. So not only are you looking at the potential of just being better, you have the potential to make the playoffs. And I still, to this day, stand by my quote after we got Chinikov and we re-signed Laine, that this team can win a cup within the next 5 years. And I think that's down to 3 or 4 now. This team can still win a cup within the next 5 years. They just have to stay healthy and pay their guys on time. And not, because that's the other thing that irritated me, how long it took to re-sign Patrick Laine. That was ridiculous.
I can only imagine about such contract situations left and right.
It's insane. Anyway, our next team is the New Jersey Devils. Now, we're coming into the 50th season for the Devils. This team was established as a franchise on June 11th, 1974, and 41st season of franchise, relocated to Colorado prior to the 82-83 season. This season saw the Devils clinch a playoff spot for the first time since 2018, following a win over the Ottawa Senators on March 25th, 2023. On April 6th, the team recorded its second 50-win season in franchise history In the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, the Devils defeated the New York Rangers, which we will talk about a little bit later, in a 7-game series. It was their first playoff series win since the 2011-12 season, which was also against the Rangers. They were then defeated by the previously discussed Carolina Hurricanes in a 5-game series in the second round. New Jersey finished second in the Metropolitan Division and third in the East. The record in 2022 was 52-22-8, 24-13-4 at home, 28-9-4 on the road, 291 goals for, 226 goals against. GM is Tom Fitzgerald, head coached possibly still by Lindy Ruff.
They are.
Captain was Nico Hischier.
He still is the captain.
Alternates were Jack Hughes and Andre Palat. Sorry for the mispronunciation. Arena, they play at the Prudential Center. And the team leaders were Jack Hughes. He is all over this. He was the leader in goals with 43, assists with 56, points with 99. Penalty minutes, owned by Miles Wood with 76. Plus minus, Thomas Tatar, plus 41. Goalies, most wins, Vitek Vanacek with 33. Goals against average belonged to Akira Schmidt, 2.13. This team, in my opinion, looks littered with just tough, constant, always on the ice, always ready to play and throw a beat down kind of guys. Again, another roster that's just littered with at least 60 games played and up for the most part. A few in the regular season anyway. A few with less, but I'm sure probably injuries or something. Let's see. October, 6-3. November was their big month, 13-1. December, they went 4-7-2. January, 9-2-2. February, 7-2-1. March, 8-5-3. April, they went 5-2. They were eliminated, as discussed earlier, by the Carolina Hurricanes. I think overall, in my opinion, this outlook for this team is probably roughly about where it was last year. I think they can reproduce roughly the same that they got last year. I think this is easily a 50-win team. I think they're going to be in the plus for the most part overall. Again, with their home and road record, they were a dominant road team last year. They crushed everyone. So overall, that's what I got. What do you got?
You know, I'm surprised that last year was just their second 50-win season in their franchise's history, and not to mention that they went on the longest winning streak in franchise history of 13 consecutive wins back at the beginning of the season as well. And this, from what we're seeing here from the Devils, we just saw the opening of what is a wide contention window for them. Nobody expected them to make the playoffs last year, but they held in there in the Metro Division running with the Carolina Hurricanes until what came down to the last day of the regular season in the end. They were there, and they missed out by just 1 point, 1-12 to Carolina's 1-13. They saw many breakout years from their young stars, including Jack Hughes, who had a 43-point jump from 2022 and finished with 99 points. The main difference was that even though he finished with 56 points in 2022, that year he played just 49 games due to injuries. Dougie Hamilton also had the best season of his career with 74 points. Many of their young players are signed. Many of their top guys are signed to long-term contracts, including Hughes, who's in the second year of an 8-year deal, Hamilton, the third year of a 7-year deal, and they just gave out new contracts to Timo Meier and Jesper Bratt for identical 8-year deals, though at differing cap hits. Bratt, $7.875 million, Meier, $8.8 million. Meyer had it rough with the Devils in the playoffs, though there is that adjustment period when it comes to going from one team to the other. He was with the Sharks previously in San Jose, where he had 76 points in 77 games in the season prior to last year. Bratt is coming off his second straight 73-point season. And while they lost Miles Wood, Wood can be considered more of an offensive player, and that contrasts with the defensive play of what Michael McLeod and Nathan Bastian have to offer. Tomáš Nosek brings exactly the defensive play, not to mention faceoffs that McLeod also brings on that fourth line. Oh, and by the way, speaking of offense, how about Tyler Toffoli? They get him for a third liner, and they acquire him from the Calgary Flames in exchange for third line forward Igor Sharangovich and a third round pick from this year's draft. Absolute mastery in trade work by Tom Fitzgerald to acquire Toffoli. It was in the final year of his contract that he previously signed with the Montreal Canadiens. But Toffoli is coming off a career year of Calgary. And even though he had 73 points last year, there are a number of players on Calgary that are upset with the current state of the franchise in terms of contract renewals. But we'll discuss Calgary in another episode. Toffoli, on one part, he not only brings offense, but also valuable, and I mean valuable playoff experience, because he went to 3 Stanley Cup finals, one with Montreal, and 2 championships with the LA Kings. He got a primary assist on the Stanley Cup winning goal in 2014, mind you. And the young guys, let's bring them up. In terms of prospects, Akira Schmid and Luke Hughes, 2 of their top prospects. Schmid showed out in the playoffs from the moment he was inserted in Game 3 against the Rangers, and he has not looked back for the rest of that series. Had it rough with Carolina, but there's some growing pains for young teams that are making their first playoff appearance in a while. And the Devils encountered that against a more experienced team in the Hurricanes. But it was a learning experience. The Devils will be back and in a long contention window. It's wide open there for the taking. And they'll be expected to be one of the many teams to be competing for the Stanley Cup. That's for certain there with the core that they have assembled. And kudos to Tom Fitzgerald, and kudos to the head coaching job that Lindy Ruff has brought in.
All right. Now, the beginning of the New York discussion. Now, last year was the 51st season in franchise history for the New York Islanders. It was the second season in UBS Arena. Lane Lambert was promoted to head coach on May 16, 2022, after Barry Trotz was fired at the end of the 21-22 season. The Islanders clinched a playoff berth on April 12, 2023, after defeating the Montreal Canadiens. The Islanders lost to the Carolina Hurricanes in the first round in 6 games. During Game 3 against the Hurricanes, the Islanders set a record for the fastest consecutive 4 goals in Stanley Cup playoffs history at 2 minutes and 18 seconds, which is just insane to think about. I mean, that tells you this team can score at will. They finished 4th in the Metropolitan, 7th in the East. The overall record was 42-31-9. Home record was 25-13-3. Road record was 17-18-6. Goals for, 243. Goals against, 222. The GM, Lou Lamoriello. Coach, as we discussed, Lane Lambert. Captain, Anders Lee. Alternates were Josh Bailey and Cal Clutterbuck. Brock Nelson. Now, Brock Nelson, just looking as an overview at this, is a complete monster and a total beast at the game. I mean, leads the team in goals with 36, leads the team in assists with 39, leads the team in points with 75. Penalty minutes, Scott Mayfield with 83, plus minus. Adam Pellich with plus 15. In the goal, it looks like their strong suit was Ilya Sorokin. He had 31 wins, and he has the goals against average with 2.34. Overall, looking at their schedule month by month, they had what you basically want for a professional team plays over months periods. It went 5-4 in October. They had a booming month in November, went 10-5. They went 6-5-2 in December. They went 4-8-3 in January. That seemed to be their little slip-off point. They closed out the season in February of 6-3-3, March 8-3-1, and April they went 3-3. You had heavy, good start in the beginning. You had a slight drop-off, but still good. Then you had a major drop-off, and then you rebounded at the end of the season with 2 good months before you had an average month. Like we said, eliminated by the Carolina Hurricanes in 6 games in the first round of the playoffs. And this team is littered with guys, top-heavy it seems like, but guys that played a full season more or less. The rotation for the lines on the rosters as the skaters would be my question. Do you feel like New York, and I guess we should have brought it up before, but do you feel like New York has a good rotation of guys? Do you feel like there's no like, oh, well, this guy shouldn't be here in this spot in this rotation. He should instead be here behind in this other rotation because the guy behind him in his spot is better. And kind of what's your thoughts and takes on the Islanders? I think, they're built. Most of these franchises we're going to find in the East especially seem like they're basically built the way they need to be able to make the playoffs. It's a matter of weeding out which one's better than the others. And I mean, that's obviously what the playoffs do to find the best team in the conference. I mean, to me, I feel like I said, the East is just top heavy, but definitely for the most part outside of the Jackets, you have consistent contenders every year out of the teams we've already talked about.
Yeah, we have a lot of contenders over at the East. And, the Eastern Conference in the NHL is proof of why I want a play-in tournament in the NHL. That's for another day, Ado. But for all to talk about the play-in tournament that I can bring up about the Islanders, in a sense, one can argue that they reached their ceiling 2 years ago, conference finals, with this current core. Much of the talk during the season was about Bo Horvat when they acquired him on January 30th and later signed to an 8-year extension a week later. Though 16 points in 30 games after he put up 54 points in 49 games in that same season with the Vancouver Canucks before the trade, not the most ideal drop-off of how to put it. Though Horvat, he's still a premier goal-scoring talent, and the Islanders need that if they were to stay in contention. What didn't help the Islanders was that Matthew Barzal got injured with 2 months left to go in the regular season. And he did not look like he was back in form come playoff time with just 2 points in 6 playoff games after he had 51 points in 58 regular season games. Felt like he was staying with the point per game pace more or less. But injuries, even though they're part of the game, it's just not good. No matter how you feel about it. But nonetheless, they need the Vancouver version of Horvat if they were to bounce back. To go on with Brock Nelson and him having his case for being the best forward on the team outside of guys not named Horvat or Barzal. But Ilya Sorokin, the fact that he was nominated for the Vezina Trophy, and with the stats they put up, 2.34 GAA and a .924 save percentage, it shows that he's a top 3 goaltender in the league. He's up there. And he got rewarded with an 8-year extension this offseason that he will be staying in Long Island until 2032, but $9.5 million cap hit. Though My main concern of the Islanders, I know they scored 4 goals in 2 minutes and 18 seconds in their first ever playoff game at UBS Arena. I know about that. My main concern is the roster that they built around Horvat, Barzal, Nelson, Adam Pellet, Ryan Pollock, Noah Dobson, and Sorokin. That's my main concern because it's aging. The identity line as players age 32 and older. Because don't get me wrong, in their heyday, the identity line was one of the more physical lines in the league, able to body check other players at will. But now it feels like the wear and tear is showing in their bodies. Matt Martin is 34, Casey Zeke is 32, and Cal Quarterbuck is 35. Anders Lee is 33, and Kyle Palmieri is 32. John Gabriel Pageau is 30, and even though Nelson, for as much as we say that he is an argument for being the best forward on a team, he's silently 31. So the age is certainly there. Not to mention that they gave out a 7-year deal to Scott Mayfield, who is also 30. And even though he's a defensive defenseman, he has problems with turnovers. Pierre Engvall, who also got a 7-year deal, has not scored 20 goals in a season.
Uh-oh. Something happened.
I realized I got muted. Little miscommunication on the browser part. So little technical difficulties. We apologize for that because it said the browser lost connection to the microphone, but now it's back. But Semyon Varlamov, he got a 4-year deal, and he's 35. It's very fair to wonder how many more productive seasons he has left in him before the end of his contract. He'll be 39 by the time his contract ends. Not to mention the team is arguably the worst prospect system in the league. And even though William Dufour has the highest upside of them, that's not saying much. And there's still going to be a team that's going to compete for playoff spots, but that's most likely going to be their ceiling this year. And constantly relying on Ilya Sorokin to bail out the team is not a recipe for success. Sorry, Islanders fans, but for as much as Lou Lamoriello is not going to admit it, the team may need to consider a rebuild if they don't improve.
Yeah, I mean, I just worry that these teams that are so top heavy in the East, it sounds like their star guys are mostly older people. And so I just worry that, once they go, are these teams going to fall off? Or are we going to see an NHL version of the way Ohio State and Alabama are in football, where it's just like a factory? One goes, replace them with the next guy. The next guy that comes in is just as good as the guy he's replacing. So there is no fall off.
I mean, did we get that before with the Avalanche, Red Wings, and Devils in the late 90s and early 2000s?
Yeah. I just, that battle for the top spots is going to be interesting because it's all about what moves do you make. And I just think that right now it sounds like the Islanders are not really making the right moves that they need to make or that they should make to be able to continuously be in the top half of the conference.
Yeah, that's the truth, even though they do have a young talent in Barzal, who was the only player among his draft class, and that draft class featured Connor McDavid. He's the only player of that draft class to win the Calder Trophy for the Rookie of the Year. But the fact that he has never gone back to his career high total of 85 points in his rookie year, has me wondering, will we get a full season of Horvat and Barzal together? Because in a short stretch between these two, their chemistry looked on point in the regular season. We'll just have to see more of them. That's what the Islanders are wondering about.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's so many. There's a lot more questions for this New York team, I feel like, than maybe the next New York team that we're going to talk about. And most of the teams that we've already talked about. I mean, right now, the Islanders only have more questions than the Columbus Blue Jackets as far as the teams we've talked about. Speaking of the Rangers, I think that's a good leeway. Now, your 22 to 23 Rangers played their 96th season and 97th overall. During the offseason, the Rangers named Jacob Trouba the 28th captain in franchise history. Trouba became the first captain since Ryan McDonough and was traded during the 17 to 18 season and is also the 12th defenseman in franchise history to be named captain. He is the fourth consecutive U.S.-born player to be named captain after Chris Drury from 2008 to 2011, Ryan Callahan from 11-14, and McDonough from 14 to 18. Trouba served as an alternate captain in the previous 2 years while being lauded for his leadership abilities and by previous Rangers head coach David Quinn and his successor Gerard Gallant. On March 14th, 2023, the Rangers were featured in the first ever live animated NHL telecast called NHL Big City Greens Classic. ESPN, Disney, and the NHL teamed up to showcase ice hockey to a younger audience. They defeated the Washington Capitals in a game that featured characters from the award-winning cartoon playing for both teams. The Rangers clinched a playoff berth on March 27th after losses by the Buffalo Sabres and Florida Panthers in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Rangers, despite leading the series 2-0, were eliminated by the New Jersey Devils in 7 games. Head coach Gallant resigned from his duties after the Rangers' elimination from the playoffs. Now, they finished third in the Metro, fifth overall in the conference. They had a record of 47-22-13, home record of 23-13-5, road record of 24-9-8. Goals for was 277, goals against was 219. GM is Chris Drury. Coach was Gerard Gallant. Captain is Jacob Trouba. Alternates were Barclay Goudreau, Chris Kreider, Artemi Panarin, Panera Bread Man, Mika Zibanejad, and they play Zibanejad, and they play at Madison Square Garden. Team leaders, goals was Zibanejad with 39. None other than the bread maker had the most assists with 63 and the most points with 92. Penalty minutes was given to Trouba was 63. Plus minus was Ryan Lindgren plus 29. Goal wins goes to Igor Shesterkin, and the goals average as well with 37 wins and 2.48 on the goals against average. Overall, basically a middle-of-the-line average team here with the Rangers. 5-3-2 in October, 6-6-2 in November, 8-3-2 in December, 8-2-2 in January, 7-3-1 in February, 10-4-2 in March, and 3-1-2 in April. March being their best month, April being their worst. This team definitely, they have guys for sure, but to me, this team seems like it's almost in like rebuild mode, more or less. They're obviously still contending, finishing 5th last year in the conference, 3rd in the division. So they're definitely not necessarily in a bad place, but it seems like almost a constant small rebuild with the Rangers, in my opinion. Obviously, they have Panera Bread Man, as we like to call him over here. So I do hope that Panarin does have success in New York, but I don't think it's going to be, at best, it's going to be the same kind of year that it was last year. But at worst, I think there's going to be a drop-off.
So we'll see how they go on this. Well, it feels like not too long ago when there were ambitions of a Stanley Cup when they acquired not only Vladimir Tarasenko, but also Patrick Kane. But it feels like a recurring theme with the Rangers, having to rely on their superstar goaltender to carry the workload for them. Wasn't just with Igor Shesterkin. It was with Henrik Lundqvist in the past. And you can also argue Mike Richter before Lundqvist, though that 1994 team did have some greats like Mark Messier, Sergei Zubov, Brian Leach, Adam Graves, Esa Tikkanen, those guys. But the key pieces are still there in Rangers Town. So including their star players like Artemi Panarin, Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider, who led the league in power play goals 2 years ago. Well, in 2022. So it's still there. Adam Fox being their number one defenseman and one of the two best defensemen in the league. He's up there with Kel Makar at the top two. Though there are a lot of question marks surrounding young talent because historically, the Rangers have not been the best team at developing young talent. And that trend has been continuing because Alexei Lafreniere and Capo Caco are nowhere near where they're supposed to be in their development trajectories, despite the formation of the kid line ahead of the 2022 playoffs, when the two of them were in a line with Philip Keedle. And they have a hole at the top line right wing, but they can't fill that out because of the lack of cap space. They're currently over the cap, so they cannot sign Patrick Kane anymore. Vladimir Tarasenko, he's in Ottawa now, so he's out of the equation. And that's despite signing Blake Wheeler to a one-year deal at $800,000 after he got bought out by the Winnipeg Jets. And even though Wheeler, he's not what he was, he can still get offensive contributions to a team, though he's more of an offensive guy than he is a defensive guy. But the tight salary cap is not helping them, even though they gave new contracts to Lafreniere and rising young defenseman Keandre Miller, who is finding his home next to Jacob Trouba on the second defensive pairing. So this is a win now team, and that was emphasized by them adding Eric Gustafsson, who can play in sheltered minutes on a third pairing, and he's going to get exactly that with Braden Schneider as his defensive partner. Schneider was another first-round pick, and he knows his role as a shutdown defenseman on the third pairing, though it's also fair to wonder how much longer that the Rangers have it in them to continue competing at the rate that they were. Another deep run or two like they did in 2022 should get them to satisfy this current core, but it feels like time is running out quickly for the Rangers. And I mean quickly.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm worried about. Is there's going to be a time, and I'm afraid it's going to be really soon, where we see New York have a fall off, and I worry. I don't want the Rangers to go through what we've been going through 23 years, because we're almost constantly in a rebuild. I think the organization and the people that head the organization are better than that. So I'm not fully worried about that, but I am worried to see how bad of a drop-off the Rangers will have. I think, what's with both New York teams headed for a drop-off, what's Blood Week going to look like from now on?
I don't feel that New York wants to know.
I don't think either fans of either organization want to know.
That's why I said New York, because it's ambiguous at this point. It can refer to either the Islanders or the Rangers. I'm referring to both teams.
Yeah. Oh. All right. The Philadelphia Flyers are next on the board. So 2022 was the 56th season for the franchise that was established on June 5th, 1967. April 1st, 2023, the Flyers were eliminated from playoff contention after a loss to the Buffalo Sabres. On March 10th, 2023, they fired GM Chuck Fletcher, replaced him with Daniel Briere before the season started. In the Metro, the Philadelphia Flyers, God love them, because if memory serves, they still have my favorite jacket in Cam Atkinson.
Yep.
Finished one spot above the Jackets in the Metro in 7th, 2 spots above in the East in 14th, with an overall record of 31, 38, and 13, home record of 18, 18, and 5, road record of 13, 20, and 8. Goals for is 222, goals against 277. Daniel Briere is the GM. Coach is John Tortorella. Torts. Captain, it says it's vacant. Alternate is Scott Lawton. My guess would be that Scott Lawton will be the captain, but who knows? They play at Wells Fargo Center. Your team leaders from last year. Goals, Travis Konechny with 31. Kevin Hayes with 36 assists. Travis again with 61 points is your points leader. Penalty minutes. Nicholas Deslauriers with 136 penalty minutes. Oh my goodness, that's a lot of time in the penalty box. Plus and minus is owned by 3 people at +3. You have Noah Cates, Brendan Lemieux, and Lucas Sedlak. Wins for goalies. You got Carter Hart with 22 wins, and he owns the leading spot for goals against average with 2.93. Monthly breakdown for the Flyers. Oh my goodness. I'm looking at a slightly better version of the Blue Jackets monthly breakdown in the regular season. 5-2-1 in October, 3-8-4 in November, which is where it all went horribly, despicably wrong. You needed to have a better November for sure. You tried to make up ground in January and March, but it was not enough. Plus, you had a horrendous April and February, which is no help. Between December and February, in my opinion, that's where you got to have your best months. December, 5-7-2, 8-4-2 in January, 2-7-1 in February, 6-4-3 in March, and 2-6 in April to close out the season. This team completely fallen off from where they were not very long ago. Overall, I'm not sure when we see Philadelphia have success again. Who knows? I think you're stuck in a constant rebuild right now. Only up from here, boys. So find your guys, pay your guys, find the right system, find the right coach, and let's take off.
Oh, man. What a fall from grace for the Flyers. I mean, they were in the second round in 2020, and when there were 24 teams in a bubble playoffs. It wasn't that long ago when that happened. And then everything went. The plane crashed. Well, we gotta put out the fires before it turns into a wildfire. And good thing that Danny Briere and the firefighter crews came in to put out the fires. As quickly as possible, right there. Well, they're trying to reverse. Or he and the front office are trying to reverse the damage in which Chuck Fletcher has inflicted on this team. And while Kevin Hayes was all right as a player, he's not worth $7 million a year. So that's why they trade him away at a 50% retained salary to the St. Louis Blues. Mm-hmm. The return was just a 6th-round pick, which is underwhelming in a sense, but maybe it could be a cap dump in one way. Though one could ask, could this be truly be called a rebuilding year if most of the old core is still around? I mean, there are several players still in trade talks and rumored to be in the trading mill. Sean Couturier, Travis Konechny, Scott Lawton, and Travis Sanheim all in trade talks. Carter Hart is basically an enigma between fans of hockey. One day he's in trading talks. The next day, he's been taken off the trading board. Well, Hart, in my opinion, I say the Flyers should keep him because he's still young. And he's been a bright spot in what has been a dark time for the Flyers. He actually put up decent numbers behind a bad Flyers defense, which made up for the god-awful 2021 that he had. And to look at the draft from what they had this year, not only do you bring in Matvei Michkov, one of the better players in the draft, but also Oliver Bonk in the 1st round. And that is a slam dunk 1st round by Danny Briere. They have several contracts that are anchoring the team down, but given their current stance, they can afford to keep several bad contracts because they're clearly nowhere near a position to compete. Cal Peterson, under contract 2 more years, $5 million cap hit. He got acquired in the free team trade that sent Ivan Provorov to Columbus. Rasmus Ristolainen was a Chuck Fletcher signing. He's under contract for 4 more years at $5.1 million in a cap hit. His career high in points was 43, which was set in 2019. He hasn't even come close to reaching that mark since. He's also career minus on the plus-minus scale. So that's another anchor contract that's weighing the team down, unfortunately. And Nick Deloriers, who led the team in penalty minutes, as you previously mentioned, another Fletcher signing, under contract for 3 more years at a $1.75 million cap hit. He's basically a 4th-line enforcer. And plus, there's also a lot of doubt on Ryan Ellis's playing career because he's played just 4 games with the Flyers, all coming in the 2022 season. And those are the first 4 games of the season. An injury knocked him out for that year and the ones after. He's a candidate to go on the LTIR to begin this coming season. Though Couturier and Cam Atkinson, they're expected to be fully healthy and back in game action, especially since Atkinson missed the entire 2023 campaign. Philadelphia, they have good young pieces to build on. As it's mentioned already with Carter Hart. Also Noah Cates, Owen Tippett, Cam York, and Tyson Forrester. So there are some bright spots for the Flyers. This is going to be one of those years where they're expected to be at the bottom of the league. I would not be surprised if they finish at the bottom of the league. Though if John Tortorella pulls off another coaching masterclass, that would be the surprise here with the roster that he has. But then again, what else is there with the Flyers? Not a lot.
Yeah, I think there's been a slight fall off here with the Flyers. They have some pieces. I feel like it's in a constant rotation of good, bad, good, bad. You're just constantly struggling when all you have to do is just make the slight. I feel like you have the guys you need to have success. You can't do much worse than the Jackets at this point. I mean, dead last in the conference, dead last in the division. It can't be that hard. I think they made some moves in the offseason that we could see a little bit more success. I mean, again, only up from here.
Oh, for sure.
So, next up is the Pittsburgh Penguins. Pittsburgh just completed its 56th season in the NHL, was established June 5th, 1967. During the season, Evgeny Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang each played in their 1,000th NHL game, joining Crosby as the only players in franchise history to accomplish this feat while playing all 1,000 games for the Penguins. They were eliminated from playoff contention on April 12, 2023, after the Islanders beat the Canadiens, missing the postseason for the first time since 2006, which is crazy. It was almost always guaranteed that Pittsburgh would make the playoffs. And ending the longest active playoff appearance streak among 4 major North American sports leagues at 16 years. Consequently, the Dodgers of the MLB, making playoffs every year since 2013, now owned the longest active playoff streak in American professional sports. Meanwhile, the Bruins and Maple Leafs now own the longest active streak in the NHL. The Pittsburgh Penguins finished 5th in the Metro and 9th in the conference, just barely, and I mean barely, missing that playoff 8 spot. 2022-23 record was 40-31-11, 23-13-5 at home, 17-18-6 on the road. Goals for is 262, goals against 264. GM is Ron Hextall. Coach
Since been fired.
Do what?
Yeah, Hextall since been fired.
Oh.
Yeah.
Coach is Mike Sullivan. Captain, the captain, Mr. Crossbar, Sidney Crosby. Oh, wrong sport. Sidney Crosby. Alternate captains, Chris Letang and Evgeny Malkin.
Evgeny Malkin.
Okay. Playing at PPG Paints Arena. Goal leader is Jake Gensel, with 36. Assists and points are owned by Sidney Crosby with respectively 60 and 93. Penalty minutes. Malkin with 82, plus minus, is between Sidney Crosby with plus 8 and Pierre-Olivier Joseph with plus 8. And looks like Tristan Jarry is your top goalie because he had 24 wins last year and a goals against average of 2.90. So you can basically say 3 goals. Regular season is roughly the most balanced, and that's why I'm saying they just barely missed the playoffs last year. 4-4-1 in October, 6-4-3 in November, 8-3-2 in December, which is where you want to have the most success. 5-5-3 in January, which is where you probably lost it. 6-5 in February, 7-7-1 in March, 3-3-1 in April. With that being said, I think this team is perfect where they're at. They finished at 9th. All they got to do is have a little bit more success, and you can start that playoff streak all over again. I think we will see Pittsburgh make the playoffs, and I think we can see them start the streak again. I think they could almost make a deep run as well. But I turn it over to you, as you are the resident Penguins all-knowing gentleman.
All right. Just to give some context about what happened this offseason, it's crazy to believe that we would see the Penguins missing the playoffs in the first time in which Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin have each played a full 82-game season at the same time. Normally, we would think of the Penguins missing the playoffs as a result of the core getting old and unable to produce at the rate that they were previously. But this case was more of a mix of inconsistent goaltending, subpar defensive play, and subpar bottom 6 forward depth. This team was relying heavily on the top 6 forward core and Chris Letang. That top 6 forward core being Crosby, Malkin, Jake Gensel, Ricard Raquel, Brian Rust, and Jason Zucker. Zucker is now in Arizona. And at one point, we had the worst third line in the league between Brock McGinn, Jeff Carter, and Kasperi Kapanen. The only one who remains from that putrid third line is Carter, who is 38 years old and on the last year of his contract. This is a Hextall signing after he saw some flashes in a short stint in 2021. I can understand about the 1 year of brilliance, one short half year of brilliance from Carter in the time he was acquired at the 2021 trade deadline. But at the time he was 36 and had something left in him. It feels like Carter's operating on an empty tank. But this is besides Jeff Carter. Many mistakes were made under Ron Hextall, such as, I just can't fathom how many mistakes that he made as a GM. But Michael Granlund, boy, did he fall off. From 34 or so points with the Nashville Predators before he got traded to the Pittsburgh Penguins, only to have 5 points in 21 games in the rest of the season. That's a big-time woof. And since then, Hextall has been fired alongside President of Hockey Operations Brian Burke. In comes Kyle Dubas, who's been appointed to both positions. He stepped down as general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs after the contract was not renewed of him. And immediately he starts pulling off wizardry in the offseason. Start with Riley Smith, who won a Stanley Cup with the Vegas Golden Knights. Not only does he bring in that offense and recoups that loss of Zucker, but also brings in that much-needed penalty killing, having scored 5 goals shorthanded, more than the entire Penguins team combined shorthanded all season last year. So that brings in that much-needed second-line forward that the Penguins need to take over for the loss of Zucker. The downside is that Jake Gensel missed the first month of this season because of ankle surgery. The recovery timetable at the time of the surgery that he had was 3 months. So he'll miss the first month. So it's not the worst thing in the world. And thankfully so for my Penguins. So, and Dubas has also shored out the bottom 6 forward depth with the additions of Noah Chari, Lars Eller, Vinny Nostroza, Andreas Janssen, who primarily is Achari and Eller, and also Matt Nieto. Nieto, Achari, and Eller have one thing in common: defensive-minded guys. Nieto is not a physical guy, but how he uses his defensive game is more of his stick. Achari can also chime in offensively as well, and Eller, even though he isn't chiming in at the offensive rate that he used to, he can contribute in a fourth-line role, and that's more fit for him. Ryan Graves makes up for the loss of Brian Dumoulin, and to be honest, this is an upgrade. Dumoulin's defensive game wasn't the same as it was before, back when the Penguins won back-to-back Stanley Cups. Graves basically is Dumoulin and the Penguins won back-to-back Stanley Cups, as Graves has a reputation for being a defensive defenseman. Tristan Jarry is the big question mark because he was as a goaltender with the Penguins this past season. He has a high ceiling, but at the same time, a low floor. So he's basically rolled the dice to see what you can get. Well, on that front, it was a little quiet until the big fish. Enter Erik Karlsson, acquired for a hefty amount in a free team trade between the Penguins, San Jose Sharks, and the Montreal Canadiens that also saw the Penguins land Rem Pitlick. Though Karlsson, he immediately boosts the defensive core on the offensive side. He's not a defensive guy, but that's not what the Penguins are acquiring him for. They're looking for offense, and he improves the team and the guys around him no matter where he goes. He's the first defenseman since Brian Leetch in 1992 to record 100 points in a season. And because of that, he won the Norris Trophy. I'm not even mad about that. I am so impressed and so stoked that we're getting a defenseman of that caliber onto a team. It's the first time that a Norris Trophy winning defenseman got traded in the offseason. It's insane to think about. So playoffs are certainly a realistic chance there. And this season for the Penguins has to be the highest that Penguins fans, myself included, are feeling since the Cup winning years. Let's go.
Let's go, Penguins. Yes, I do think, again, this team having been on the verge of making the playoffs, I think we can see a push to get over the top and just the Penguins get in again. Because, I mean, the NBA playoffs is nothing without LeBron James. The NHL playoffs are not the same without the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah, it feels like there's a similar point, a case in point that Sidney, whenever you think the Stanley Cup playoffs, you think Sidney Crosby, you think Alex Ovechkin, all the times when the Penguins and Capitals crashed against each other, and I swear we'll get to the Capitals soon, but the Penguins, 16 years straight and 3 Stanley Cups out of it. This is one remarkable run.
Oh, yeah, 100% for sure. And speaking of the Capitals, our last team for the night in the Metro is the Washington Capitals. Now, in 2022, it was their 49th season in the NHL as a franchise. They were established on June 11th, 1974. The Capitals missed the playoffs for the first time since the 2013-14 season and only the second time since 2006-07, ending their 8-season playoff streak, being eliminated from contention on April 4th, 2023, after the Florida Panthers defeated the Sabres 2-1. Now, in the division, the Capitals finished 6th and 13th in the Eastern Conference. The record from last season was 35-37-10. Home record was 18-16-7. Road record 17-21-3. Goals for 225. Goals against 265. GM is Brian McClellan. Head coach is Peter Laviolette. Captain, the captain, Alexander Ovechkin. Alternative captains were Nicholas Backstrom and John Carlson, and they play at Capital One Arena. Team leaders, Alex Ovechkin with 42 goals. Evgeny Kuznetsov with 43 assists. Ovechkin with 75 points. Penalty minutes, Tom Wilson with 78. Plus minus goes to Trevor Van Riemsdyk with plus 10. Goalies, domination by Darcy Kemper with 22 wins and 2.87 goals against average, basically say average 3 goals against. Here we go again. Capitals. 5-4-1 in October, 5-7-2 in November. That's where that little slip happened. You didn't need that. Needed a couple more wins in November for sure. 11-2-2 in December. January 6-7-1. February 2-7. March 5-6-3, which didn't help. But your April, it didn't help the most at 1-4-1. Ovechkin played in only 73 games. 42 goals, 33 assists for 75 points. Plus and minus was minus 16. His PIM was 48. He definitely, even though he didn't play 82 games, stands out as one of the top guys on the Capitals, which why wouldn't he? He is the face of the franchise, just like Nash and Crosby are for their respective franchises. That being said, I think there's a lot here for the Capitals to build off of. They have a lot more building room than, say, the Penguins or the other teams that we talked about that did make the playoffs. That being said, what are your thoughts on the Washington Capitals heading into 2023 to 24?
It feels like we're seeing a transition phase in Washington. So they're shifting focus from competing for Stanley Cups to ensuring about Alex Ovechkin breaking Wayne Gretzky's goals record. So to check where we last left off last season, Ovechkin's standing is second place, only behind Gretzky. Ovechkin is 822 goal scorer in his career. He needs 73 more to pass Gretzky's record of 894. At the same time, Washington wants to remain competitive to keep Ovechkin and the veterans there happy. So, because veterans on rebuilding teams, not the most ideal thing, especially when those veterans are some of the better ones on your team. Nicholas Backstrom had hip resurfacing surgery on his left hip, an issue that was plaguing him for the last few years. And he's looking to get back to 100%, which I think he will be. So even though the Stanley Cup contention window is officially closed, it closed that window having won one cup in 2018. It was a long-awaited one, given how many years Ovechkin and Backstrom have been in the league together. So the big shock with Washington is that Evgeny Kuznetsov was not traded away this offseason. His name was appearing all over the rumor mill constantly, and it only intensified after he had a down year by his standards, 55 points in 81 games, which was 23 less than what he had in 2022. And to mention, Peter Laviolette, he's now with the Rangers as their head coach. The new head coach is Spencer Carberry, who was previously an assistant coach with the Toronto Maple Leafs under Sheldon Keefe. So that may be emphasizing on maturity of the young players that they're trying to emphasize here, like Sonny Milano, Alexei Protas, Martin Fehervary, Joe Snively, Connor McMichael. So, and we get to their additions here with Washington. This looks to be a middle-of-the-pack team that we don't know what to expect from them if they're going to compete in the playoffs. Though Max Pacioretty is a low-risk signing, though it can be of high reward considering that they're hoping that he fully recovers from a second straight Achilles tear in as many years. Oof. He played just 5 games last year with the Carolina Hurricanes. They'll get a full year of Rasmus Sandin, an offensive defenseman who was acquired at the deadline after he had trouble finding his potential with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Then you get Joel Edmondson, a defensive defenseman who brings in Stanley Cup winning experience, having previously won a cup with the St. Louis Blues and then went to another final with the Montreal Canadiens. He'll be on the bottom pair of Trevor Van Riemsdyk, so that can certainly help. And last of all, Tom Wilson, who got a 7-year extension, who can likely compete for the captaincy once Ovechkin retires. So with the 7-year extension, it'll keep him until he is 37. He'll be under contract until 2031. Not only is he one of the more physical forwards on the team, but he has the offensive prowess that he brings with him. He has found a home with Ovechkin on the top line, and that certainly helps him on the long term. So he'll be a key figure to Washington's offense in the many years to come. Once again, we don't know what to expect from them because they're not good enough to compete for a cup, but not bad enough to get a high draft pick. But there's one thing that's for certain: the goal tracker for Ovechkin. That'll be continuing to count, and that'll be on and counting here as the seasons go by. So it will take it about 2 years until he breaks the record at the minimum.
Yeah. I think you're right. They're basically trying to bubble wrap Ovechkin, keep him healthy, keep him wanting to, be here in DC and play for the Capitals. I do think he'll be someone that plays his full career with the Capitals and retires as a Cap. Everybody knows for a fact that the Capitals were on the top of the mountain when they won the Cup a few years back. I discredit it just a little bit because you beat an expansion team, but hey, the expansion team was good enough to make it there in the first year, let alone win it all a few years later. So that's why it's just a little bit, because it was an expansion team's first year. But I mean, if they win it like 2-3 years later, that tells you that expansion team was actually good. So
yeah, it's basically a championship. It's a championship. It's a championship every time, no matter how you look at it. Even if it was an expansion team, still a professional hockey team. And that expansion team, as we'll talk about later, they have redefined what it means to be an expansion team. The Washington, they've certainly enjoyed their many years of contention. And for the many fans up there in DC, don't take it for granted. Enjoy what you have now, because
Absolutely.
you don't know what you have until it's gone.
Absolutely. Well, with that being said, we ran a little bit over, and it's just because I wanted us to be able to get every little detail we can in. We do have more news to get to. We will have to come on later this week. We'll figure that out. And because we'll definitely get those out because I know you wanted to. So don't forget, everyone, comment, like, and subscribe. And we will see you on the next one. Subscribe to Buckeye Mike. Subscribe to Shady Sports Network because they're awesome over there. They're pushing to almost 900 subs over there. We just passed 150. Let's push to 200. And we'll see you on the next one. Everyone have a good night.
I'm a game changer. I'm a game changer. I'm a game changer.